Chris. I appreciate you being here because I just want to get your reactions and your feelings.
First of all, I'm glad you did the show. I saw your monologue, and you and your staff were kind of figuring out whether or not it was the right thing to do tonight. I'm glad you did, because there's so many Americans, when these tragedies happen, who say, now is not the time to talk about this, but today is the time to talk about this. Today is the time to talk about this. We keep missing these moments to make this issue a priority. When you were a kid, it's JFK.
Yeah, when I was a kid and Oswald bought that rifle for $10 through the mail, I remember my dad going, well, that's it. You know, this nonsense is going to stop. And of course.
And in our lifetime, we have Columbine, Judd, we have Columbine, we have Oregon, we have Connecticut. I mean, just run the list, Trayvon Martin. Every time these moments happen, we keep missing Gabby Giffords in Arizona. This is a member of Congress, for God's sake. Our federal judge is killed there. And we keep kicking this can down the road. Let me just be very clear about this. The Brady campaign people, the president, I should say today, gave his remarks in the press room, which is named the Brady Briefing Room.
Sure.
Named for a guy named James Brady, who was shot and almost killed as part of Ronald Reagan's entourage when Reagan was assassinated, the attempt on his life back in 1981. So they named the briefing room after James Brady. So the president stands up today in that briefing room. It was clear. I felt his pain. And the tearing up that we saw was authentic and it was real. So I'm not trying to demonize the president. What I'm suggesting is the Brady campaign people have given him an F in his first term on doing something about gun control. But not to be outdone, he's been up against a lot of obstructionism from the Republicans on the right. So there's a bipartisan consensus in Washington that this issue isn't a priority, and it ought to be.
Now, Bob Costas was criticized on the Sunday Night Football for the shooting, and there have been, 3 since then? It was only 2 weeks ago.
Well, the problem is that whenever someone steps up to advance a conversation about the issue, they get labeled as anti-gun. There's a long way between repealing of the Second Amendment and reasonable, sensible gun control. And we've got to find a way to have that conversation without people being demonized or bastardized because they want to have a conversation about how to make this issue a priority.
Are we not enforcing? I always hear this, that why don't we just enforce the laws that are on the books? Are we not enforcing them? Are those lax?
Part of it is that, these laws ought to be better enforced, number one. But number two, we allow laws when they get on the books to expire. We had a law on the book that a few years ago had parts of it expire where assault weapons are concerned. There were 3 guns found today at this school. The other part of it is that the availability of handguns is just they're too readily available. So you got folk today on the left and the right saying that we've got to take this issue seriously. So again, I'm not trying to demonize a particular party, but we've got to make this issue a priority in our country. The question is, how many more of our precious and priceless children of all races, all colors, and all creeds, Jay, do we have to lose before we say enough is enough? That's up to us. That's up to us.
So what is, I hear the phrase sensible gun control. What is sensible gun control?
You don't need a mag that can shoot off so many rounds and kill so many people that you don't have to reload. That's unnecessary. Clearly, we don't need assault weapons on our streets. That's unnecessary. There ought to be stricter laws about who gets guns. I know Connecticut has a reasonably tough, I'm told, rule about who can get a gun. But this young man today took his mother's guns and drove his mother's car to his mother's school and killed his mother and his mother's kids. So even when there are laws in the books, they have to be enforced. But we got to get tougher about this. And again, the Brady I encourage everybody to go online to read what the Brady campaign is suggesting, because they are the best ones about this, and we ought to take this seriously.
What do we know about this shooter? Was he obviously mentally deranged?
Sure.
But the history of this? What's the story?
The story will continue to develop, of course, in the coming hours and weeks. What we do know is that he's 20 years old.
I heard 24.
I've heard 20. I've heard 24. Yeah. He's in his 20s. We know that's why the story keeps changing. We know he's young. We know he's in his 20s. We are told he took his mother's guns in his mother's car. Half of the day they were calling him Ryan, his brother, when his name is actually Adam, because apparently he had his brother's ID on him. But the story will continue to unfold, but I'm glad you asked that, Jay. Because what matters most is not what happens today. What matters most is what happens in the days to come. Are these children, again, of all races in this country, going to die senseless death that don't mean anything? And we talk about this when it happens in Arizona and in Connecticut and places like that. But most of the children in this country who die for gun violence are poor children. This happens exponentially, much greater in communities of color where poverty is a very real issue. So again, for all Americans on the left and the right, no matter your race, your color, or your creed, this is an American problem that all of us are going to have to say, we're ready to do something about this.
So how do parents explain this to their children? You know, I mean, kids are probably off this week.